Anyway, we're coming down to the last few hours of the meeting. Thank you for a great time last night. This has just been so fun. And I can't think of a better person to start the day out than a gentleman that I've gotten to know very well as a personal friend. If you haven't read his book, Build Trust, you got to read it. It's a great read, a lot of insights, not to steal from what you're going to say today, but we love you, Mike Moore. Come on up.
Trading punches with the heart of darkness, throwing the blows with your fear and corner. You're never going till it's stripped away. But part of you has got a dollar chain.
Floor covering, huh? We just do floors. Hey, how many of you were here last year and heard me last year? Okay, for you guys that did, I want to introduce you to my new personal assistant, Pepper. No, I'm teasing. I'm just teasing. All right, so today we want to talk about getting healthy and getting fit and how that leads to being financially sound. See, everybody already decided you don't want to listen now, right? I don't want to have to go work out. I don't want to have to eat what I'm not talking about that kind of healthy, obviously. I'm talking about how do you create a healthy company? And it's not enough to just be healthy, though. That's why I'm talking like this, to think about it. If I'm healthy and I'm not fit, I can't do much. I'm not sick, but I can't do much. Don't have as much energy. And if I don't have some financial discipline, even if I'm healthy and fit, I can be broke. So when we get through this today, the whole issue is how do you get all three of those things working for your company? How do you create a healthy company? And I'd ask you to start, are you a company? Are you an organization? Are you a community? Or are you an organism? And which one of those is most dangerous? The organism. Because the organism can grow. And it'll grow and feed on itself. So are you creating that kind of energy, and are you actually helping people grow so your business can grow? Because y'all come here and you share great ideas, and I sit in and listen to some of them. How many of you want your company to get better? Okay. I got bad news for you. Companies don't improve. People do. If your people don't get better, your company can't. There's a maxed limit. Oh, you can do some things. There's systems and there's processes you put in place, but those have limits. The only thing that doesn't is your people. And what are you doing to make sure that they're developing and growing? I want to show you something here. And we've talked about this in the past, 2 or 3 years ago, just a little bit. But see what Dr. Covey, this is not, now I'm doing what I'm doing. I left the last floor covering company I ran, I left after a 2-week vacation that I found 7 Habits in a used bookstore. So Dr. Covey has a big part in my life, and 7 Habits is big. But look what Covey says about people, his quote. And I'm not going to blame Tracy Comstock, the head of HR for SunTrust, for running SunTrust into bankruptcy, but she posted this on LinkedIn, and it got over 10,000 likes, but when I screenshot this, they were over 4,200 likes, 263 comments, head of HR saying, I love this quote. What's he say? If you can hire people whose passion intersect with the job, they won't need to be managed. Their fire comes from within, their motivation's internal. Who's he describing? Maybe. By the time he said this, he wasn't, because if he was still feeling this way, he would have been engaged deep enough to know that that's totally unrealistic. He's describing Michael Jordan, and for Josh, he is describing Tom Brady. He's describing the freaks in the world. I don't know about you, but I could never find this person to hire. And if you found them and hired them, how long do they stay with you? They're at the other table now. You hired them, and now they're your competitor. I mean, if they actually have this much going on, you almost can't grow fast enough and big enough to give them a position. Peak performers move up or move out. It's just what happens with them. But he's also describing something that's unrealistic to think you can do. And for most of you, how many have been doing this more than 25 years? Yeah. That's hard to do. That's hard to do. Because the reality is we're dealing with human nature. But let me tell you what the studies are showing. 11 to 22% of working people in America say that they are passionate about their work. 28% of Americans are in management positions. Let that sink in. Okay? And you do something over and over and over, and you do it for 20 years or more. Another study showed, and forensic accountants, surgeons, attorneys, intellectual property, people that deal with information, 2 years experience, 20 years experience. The 20-year experienced person got no better results than the 2-year person. No better results. Not the surgeon, not the forensic accountant, not the attorney. Because what happens is we get on autopilot, don't we? We used to trainers, we used to teach that we were trying to move a person through this curve to get him to be unconscious competence. We thought that was the highest level. They could do their job without even thinking about it and be very competent. Problem is, that's what happened to these 20-year people. Because we went back with this study and took those 20-year veterans and taught them mindfulness, taught them to be present, taught them to be fully engaged, and then their experience helped. They got better results. But that's an issue of, do you show up every day to play? Do you show up and give your best every day? How many of you worry about your employees, like, how much time they're spending on their computer, like FaceTime and Instagram, and while you're paying them? Yeah. Stop worrying about that. 37% of them are actively looking for another job on your computer. 67% of employees fantasize every day about leaving their job. 67% of 100,000 a year earners are planning to leave their job in the next 6 months. It's human nature. We get bored. Familiarity breeds contempt, anger, frustration. We see all the little flaws. That's why your engagement with your employees, are you inspiring them? Are you enlightening them? Are you empowering them? All these fun, fancy words, but we're going to talk about practically what's that mean. Are you a place that can attract talent? More importantly, can you develop it? And can you replace it? Because you're not going to keep it. That's part of the fallacy. You're going to turn talent, but are you developing talent? Back in my day, when I would interview, I used to look people in the eye and say, I need to know if your mom and dad taught you the right things, because I don't have time to teach you that. I can teach you the business, but I don't have time to re-raise you. 15 years ago, I started telling my clients, you can't say that anymore. Your job's to take them and re-raise them, because you won't find enough base that has the mental toughness, the self-discipline, the character to make your company different. You can hire people and put people in position and you can be average, because that's what we're wired to be as humans. We're wired to be average. Abby's alma mater, for decades, taught if you left people alone, and they trained most of our leaders. If you left people alone, they'd grade out in a bell curve. Most of them would fall in the middle. 2 years ago, they came out and said, leave people alone. Most of them fall to the bottom. A few in the middle, very few at the top. So back to Dr. Covey. And how does somebody that brilliant say something that stupid? 20 years experience. Okay? Plus, you have to be careful who you're paying attention to, because he's a college professor. He wasn't an entrepreneur and a businessman. He didn't hire and train people. He wrote an amazing book. He was a brilliant man. I'm thankful he wrote that book. Okay? But think about it. And in our nature, one of the things technology has given us, we now know, we can watch the brain work. So we know we're wired to remember the negative. That's what we remember. Get your salespeople together, or you, and say, name 3 customers. Name 3 jobs right now that come to mind first. Which ones are they? Okay. Your salespeople get together and talk. Who do they talk about? Most frustrating customers. So by default, who's managing the attitude of your salespeople towards your customer? Your worst customers. It's just the way we're wired. We're also wired to tell ourselves stories to make ourselves comfortable rather than to improve. We don't wake up as humans to grow and be better. That's why when you leave people alone, they fall to the bottom. You have to be in a position to lead people, push people, drag people, and we're going to talk about how you do that. How do you get healthy as a company? I will tell you, Amazon is not the end of retail. That's not the reason retail's dying. Victoria's Secret's just announced 53 stores closing. Okay? They're all shutting them down. But it's not Amazon. It's unmotivated, uninspired, unempowered retail employees. Poor service. Okay? Stand in line, they're grumpy. Can't find help. Macy's is doing well online, and it was interesting to me because 10 years ago, CEO of Macy's came out, high-end retailer, and they came out and said, we're a self-serve high-end retailer. Yeah, that sounded stupid to me, except he was right, because they were. So at least he acknowledged who they were. And they're moving online, largest retailer of clothing online now. So I expect Bezos will buy them, right? He'll just roll them into Amazon. They're opening grocery stores, you saw that. Not just the Whole Foods, but they're going to open them all across the country. So it's coming, but what can you have? Do you remember what I said your only tool you were going to have to compete in an age of AI? And we're lucky. We're really lucky. Construction, flooring, our whole industry, we're low-hanging fruit. We have great jobs, great career opportunities. We were talking about that yesterday. The best career opportunities in America are in construction and the flooring business. And we don't brag about it enough. And we're protected from AI longer than most industries, partly because our margins are so small. So there's one now to be thankful for. Because if you had real high margins, the guys with the billions and the tech would be attacking the industry more. But our margins are so small, we're at the end of that food chain. So there's an advantage. And skilled labor is going to be difficult for AI to replace. But the service part of this, does anybody remember what your greatest tool is as a human being to separate yourself from AI and your competition? Anybody remember? Huh? Hey, your pencil? That just gets you cheaper and lower margins, right? And it signs contracts, which a contract in our business is just an opportunity to lose money, isn't it? And we celebrate a contract, but that's when the work starts. That's the mental tough part we need. We celebrate, we got a contract, they gave us a bit. That's just an opportunity to lose money unless you go to work at that point. So, I mean, that's where we have to kick in and train people to be tougher than they are normally. And don't blame. How many of you are frustrated because it's hard to hire millennials that are tough? Okay? Yeah, okay. A couple of honest people, a bunch of liars in the room, right? And then some millennials. Don't blame millennials. You raised them. Huh? I raised them. The boomers were the first. I heard a new phrase, double millennial. That's us boomers. Because we were the first spoiled brats. We were the ones whose parents went through the Depression and didn't want us to have it as hard as they had it. First generation that was raised not to be better humans, but to have it better. Now we're 3 generations into that. It's time, folks, if you want to be different, if you want to stand out, if you want to blow your goals away and be more profitable and grow healthy, then you got to make it about your people. For those of you how many of you haven't heard me before? Because there's a bunch of new members. Is there anybody here who hasn't? Okay, there's a few. All right. Now I take 2 steps back. How did I get here? I got here because I made a bad career choice. Okay? My father was a high school football coach, very successful. My mother was a 4th grade teacher, both of them real high IQs. We didn't know about EQ back then, except my mom was used in her school districts to resolve conflict between teachers, and my dad was a coach, and a very successful coach. So their EQ was off the chart. So I got raised really by 2 amazing humans, but more than that, I got raised by a coach. When we were talking at dinner the other night, it wasn't until about 2 years ago that I realized how weird my upbringing was. Because Colin Cowherd was interviewing Bill Parcells, and they were giving Parcells credit for his coaching tree, and Belichick and Zimmer, and he stopped Cowherd and he said, what I had one advantage. I knew to hire coaches' kids because they're weird. They're raised weird. From 6, 7 years old, all they hear about is coaching. And it wasn't until then that I actually realized, because I knew at 9, my formal education, memory-wise, started in a locker room on a Friday night, because my dad stopped me and said, what do you hear? I go, huh? I thought my dad was 6'8" and 300 pounds, and he's 5'9", weighed about 180 pounds. It's just his presence was big. But he stopped me, and I'm looking up, and he said, what do you hear? You're with me all week. You're at practice with me all week. You're in the coach's room with me. You listen to the coach. What do you hear? I said, well, they're getting dressed. He says, yeah, but what do you hear? So when you walk in your business, what do you hear? Because my answer finally was, it sounds like they're having a good time. So he said, are they ready to play? Are they ready to play? Because everything else I do doesn't matter if I don't get them ready to play. Because as humans, we don't come wired to play. So we come wired to be comfortable, to avoid the difficult. We wake up to find the easy way. I'll add that to our list of scary things about what employees are thinking about. All the way back to my beginning, I've been asking my employees what kind of day they want. What do you think the number one answer is? It goes to easy. They're smart enough to go a good day. The really smart ones say a productive day. But when they define it, it's a day I get all my stuff on my to-do list done, no hassles, no problems, no headaches, and I can get through all my work. And then from 40 years ago, I asked my employees, how many days a year does that happen? We're in construction. We manage chaos and confusion, unrealistic time frame, and we do it for a customer with unrealistic expectations. So how many days a year do you have a day where you check everything off, get everything done, no hassles, no headaches, no troubles? How many days a year does that happen? Yeah, 0. Some people go, well, on my holiday, and I go, well, then your family's more functional than mine, because my holidays are a little stressful sometimes. Okay? The reality is your employees wake up and they're driving to work with an unrealistic goal that's going to kick them in the gut. And it's worse today than ever because half of them, your best ones, roll over and grab their cell phone before they get out of bed to do what? Check email. I don't know about you, but my customers never sent me one overnight that said, thank you so much for everything you did. No, that's not your first emails. What's your first emails? Trouble. So I wake up hoping for a good day. Now I have 3 or 4 really miserable days, normal days. And I'm telling you, it's Friday and they're driving to work, and you could turn an atheist into a prayer warrior. They're driving to work going, God, please, one good day, one day without a problem. And of course, that's Murphy's Law. But who's there to help pick them up? Because you walk in and can't you feel the employee that's in a bad mood? You can feel him. Most of the time you'll avoid them, right? And if you do ask them, how you doing, what do they say? I'm fine. Okay, well, that's enough of an excuse for me to leave them alone. Okay? That's what I do with my wife, right? You can walk in, how you doing? Fine. And then if you go, no, what's bothering you? No, just leave me alone. I'm just having a bad day. I'm not bothering anybody. Really? The building's 3 stories and the people on the 3rd floor can feel you. That was what my dad was teaching me at 9. How do they sound? How does it feel? Are your people ready to play to make you different every day? Or are you leaving them alone to fall to their human nature, which seeks comfort, wants the easy way? And I've asked you guys before, but when was the last time? Can any of you tell me one historical time when the easiest way got the best results? There isn't one in history. It's what we left out, because in 1970s, it came out, if it feels good, there was the end of. There's the beginning of the collapse of American character. If it feels good, do it. Because in your brain, what went in with that is if it doesn't feel good, don't do it. Then Nike comes out. What's their slogan? Just do it. I wish I'd have been old enough to have been at Adidas. The next day we'd have come out with don't just do it right. And you'd all be wearing Adidas today. Nobody there smart enough to say that? And we could have changed things. But we've got this culture now of looking for the easy way, avoiding difficulty. Okay? Nobody trusts. It's interesting because at Davos, the World Economic Council said the biggest crisis we have is that nobody trusts institutions or companies. So they're trying to figure out how can we make people trust us. They had 3 days of discussions. Not one comment in about, how about be trustworthy? Just be trustworthy. Start doing that, and maybe over the next 20 years, you can regain what we've lost the last 30. Now, I will tell you, people are begging for it. There's people looking. Do you know millennials' number one reason they're leaving jobs today? It'll shock you. It's because you guys don't hold the employees they work with accountable to do their work. They come in, the good ones come in, and they want to make a difference, and you don't hold the tough ones, the weak ones accountable, and so they leave. They're just too naive to know that it's going to be that way at the next 4 companies, because either the leaders are making enough money and are comfortable enough that they want to avoid that conflict, because this human nature thing's in all of us. Most of you are the types that have overcome it, but you've overcome it to a stage. Now, what's the danger? What's that danger? I watched my dad. My dad lost 3 football games in 10 years, which does not compare to Bob Ladishau, the De La Salle, where Janelle and Shay went and played, but it was amazing. The guys that played for him then, and I was going to put the picture of him that I showed you guys in the face of one of his players, and I thought, my dad wouldn't like me showing that, so I'm not going to put that up there. But during those 10 years, the players that played for him at his funeral were like, man, your dad was tough. He loved me, but man, he didn't let me get away with nothing. The last few years, his assistant coaches did that because he had mellowed. He was older. So he taught and he motivated and he enlightened the kids, but he hired different assistants. In the first those 10 years that he was winning big, his assistants were passive and they taught. Then he switched gears. So that gets back to, and Jeff and I did one a few years ago for you guys, hiring your twos. Who are your twos? You don't expect coaches to be the owner. I mean, you can be, but it's a little tough. Who are your coaches? Who are your leaders within your group that are holding people accountable? Because that's what you get with these. Now, John Wooden, the big one's my dad that was on the sideline. We were the quarterback from one of his teams that was one of my childhood heroes. But John Wooden was a mentor of mine, and it was interesting spending time with him. Here comes Jeff. Jeff, his favorite story about Wooden. Bill Walton, two-time NCAA Player of the Year, okay, at the time. They had a Christmas break just long enough. It was about 10 days. Bill grew his beard out. There's no facial hair at UCLA. Greg Lee, the point guard, came to Coach Wooden the night before practice was to start the next day, and he said to Coach, Bill grew his beard out. So training table, Wooden goes over, gets his food, goes and sits down right next to Walton. Doesn't say a word, starts cutting his food because he was efficient. He cut everything up like, into little pieces and ate fast. He believed in being quick but not hurrying, so it was fast. But he was eating, and Bill goes, Coach, you've taught us, the whole time I've known you, taught us to stand up for what we believe in. And I know you don't want facial hair, but this beard, it associates me with the people that I agree with politically, and it sets me apart. And Coach Wooden said, Bill, you're right, and that is what I want you to learn, and we're going to miss you. Two-time NCAA Player of the Year. We're going to miss you. Walton stood up, ran out of the training table, jumped on his bike, rode across, shaved his beard, came back for practice. Okay? That's love at its highest form because you set a standard and you hold it. Prisons are full of people that will tell you their parents didn't care about them. And if you ask them why, what do you think they tell you? How do you know they didn't care about you? Nobody cared. They just let me come and go. They didn't hold me accountable. When I've talked to them, I say, I bet you were easy. I bet you were real easy to deal with at 12, too. Oh, no, I was a terror. I was already hanging and banging and smoking dope and selling dope. Okay, and you wanted your mom and dad. Yeah, they didn't care about me. They just let me come and go. It's also innate in us as humans that if you care about me, you will hold me to a higher standard. Anybody ready to give up? Because if you do this right, it's exhausting. How many of you are parents? You do that right, it's exhausting, isn't it? Okay. It's the same thing. It's the same exact thing. So, as I mentioned, one of my dad's favorites and the thing that came out at his funeral the most was show up, be present, and leave it all on the field. So, back in the late 50s, early 60s, I was already hearing about being present. Are you present? Because showing up, Woody Allen said, hey, the secret to success is showing up. Except if you show up for 20 years, you'll get no better results than the 2-year person, because that's that moment when they're still present. They haven't clicked in to boredom and familiarity, and now I'm doing it as a routine and frustrated and angry. How about that employee that's in a bad mood? How much time do you want to spend with them? I can remember even disciplining my kids, and then my kid wanted to pout, especially my son. They're going to pout. I go, get outside and play. I don't feel like playing. I didn't ask you if you felt like playing. Get outside and play. Because I also knew Dr. William James 150 years ago found that you couldn't move fast and be sad. You can move fast and be angry, and you can move fast and be happy. Because anybody know what the opposite of love is? It's indifference. Who said that? Thank you. That's brilliant. Because what do most people think the opposite of love is? Hate. Heck no. Relationships don't end because you hate somebody. You're still fighting then. Relationships end when you don't care. Indifference. I give up. No more. Complacency. Well, oh man. Hey, Rob, can you back it up one? Thank you. Two guys at the bottom, Nick Saban and Dabo. Saban's, and I love Nick Saban, he's a great coach. His assistants say they endure him. And Dabo's, you can't even pay him $100,000 more than they're making and steal them from him because he's created an organism. Anybody hear his game speech? Last thing he says before every game, you know what he tells the kids? I love you. Remember, I love you. It's the last thing he tells them. Now, it sounds corny though, doesn't it? Don't you want, if you want your company to be different, don't you want a whole bunch of corny people? You definitely don't want a bunch of naysayers and whiners and complainers. You want the people that are optimistic but mentally tough enough to overcome a challenge, which is what they all give you. Top 3 guys too. Vince Lombardi long time ago, and I taught coaching all the time, but here was the thing for me. I took that coaching, and I said I got here because of a bad career choice. If I'd have known what they were going to pay coaches when I went into business, I would have stayed down that course. They didn't pay coaches back then. Yeah, if I'd have had any clue, I wouldn't be here. Or I'd be here, but I wouldn't have any experience with what you guys do. But because they pay coaches who can speak even more money. That's really stupid. But you can apply this stuff to business. That was mine for my dad and I, for Wooden and I. I got to see Vince Lombardi speak. I'm going to ask you if you have leadership presence. Because Lombardi held his first, now if you know Lombardi's story, he was a late hire in his age. He was old for his first head job in Green Bay. Came out of New York, the Giants. Held his first team meeting with Green Bay. 5 minutes before the meeting was to start, he locked the door and cut every player that wasn't in the room. He then held a team meeting, first one. Bart Starr was a young quarterback. He wasn't Bart Starr. After the meeting, and this is really old, young people, if you're not sports fans, Lombardi's the one they named the Super Bowl trophy after. That's what qualifies him to tell stories about him. And you can tell how old it is. It's really hard to find a color picture of Vince Lombardi. Most of them are black and white. But Bart Starr went to the phone booth, again, how old it was, called his wife after the meeting, and she said, "What's he like?" And Bart Starr's response was, "I don't know, but we're about to start winning." Do you have that kind of presence? Are you convicted enough and passionate enough? Only 11 to 22% of the people working in America are passionate about their work. Are you passionate, and are you still passionate about it? Can you get excited about what you do? Holy smokes, last night, looking at all those jobs. See, the after product, man, that's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing what you do. Amazing. Doing it is a pain in the ass. Am I wrong? No, doing it's hard. It's difficult. But again, easy doesn't produce excellence. So if you want easy, then go to work in retail and be an unmotivated, uninspired employee until they close the doors. All right? You can go there. Tom Landry, one of my favorites from Tom Landry was that a coach's job is to tell people what they don't want to hear, make them do what they don't want to do so they can become who they knew they always could be. So those things, and they all apply. These things aren't. The other one is for all of the leadership stuff over the last 30 years, now what's coming out, because we're dealing with human nature again, what's coming out is there isn't anything new. The way you lead people is the way you lead people. And it isn't about servant leadership. That was a phrase coined. You know, leadership's always been a servant's position because leaders have to love their people. Now, what's interesting is this unselfish or selfish? Am I being unselfish in loving people, or am I actually being selfish? For me, it's long-term selfish. I'm going to set aside my short-term selfishness, and I'm going to do what's best for those around me. I'm going to love the people around me, and I'm going to hold those people accountable. I'm going to hold them accountable to be their best version of themselves. Now, the joy is this. In a family, they don't go away. In work, doing this chases away the ones that don't want to be better. I think the number one question I've been asked over the years always has been, well, how do you know when it's time to fire somebody? And I always tell that person, it's like, if you're asking me that, it's probably 6 months too late for that one because you got somebody in mind and you just haven't acted on it. But the reality is, the instant somebody doesn't want to learn, grow, and improve, it's time to jettison. But did you hire him to do that? So love again, Wooden was loving Walton when he held him accountable. Bill also had an incident where he protested and closed down a freeway in LA. And Wooden had to remind him that they could have blocked the freeway from an emergency vehicle carrying somebody and killed them. So was he thinking beyond his own selfish desires? So he was teaching unselfishness. High standards. Quality of a person's life is in direct proportion to their commitment to excellence, regardless of their chosen field of endeavor. Are you committed to excellence, and are you holding your people accountable to be committed to excellence? It's the only way you can get healthy. Otherwise, you will bump along. And here's the thing, you can build a business on mediocrity. You can figure out what your margins are and what you're going to get, and you can just bump along. Or you can blow the roof off by being excellent. And you will attract better talent, and you will retain it longer, and you will develop talent because they'll hold each other accountable. That's when you know you've crossed the line. 3 things we can't have. And look what Saban says. Can't have complacency, can't have selfishness, can't lose our accountability. That means he's asking you to be enthusiastic, unselfish, and responsible. Is that too much to ask your employees? I want you to come to work excited. I want you to come to work enthusiastic. I want you to come to work and be unselfish. And I want you to come to work and be responsible. Is that too much to ask people? They're not going to do it on their own, except 1 or 2, and then if you don't hold people accountable, people leave because they don't want to be around people who aren't that way. Why does this work? Here's the other thing we know. Forget your faith, your religion. We know scientifically at this point that we are a spirit and a mind and a body. Okay? We can have a discussion, but there's physical pictures at death of energy leaving the body, and it doesn't dissipate, it leaves the room. Doesn't just dissipate and go. So it's always been this. The problem is it has to be in this order. And in America, especially Western philosophy, even when we quote those 3 words, how do most people say them? How do we say them? Body, mind, and spirit. You're already set up to fail because you've got them backwards. Your body first, your mind second, your spirit last, you're screwed. LQ, IQ, and EQ. And we now know IQ. First of all, IQ is raisable. The guy who invented the test did it to prove you could raise your IQ. And then for decades, education used it to say, no, it's a fixed number. No, it's not, and we're now aware it's not. But EQ is your emotional intelligence, but it's your self-awareness and then your ability to restrain yourself from behaving the way you feel. So am I aware of my emotions, and am I able to then control them? See, emotions make great servants. They make lousy masters. And EQ, your emotional intelligence, is how well you can manage that. LQ, and that's the thing I said last year, LQ, your love quotient, your ability to choose to love people, is the single biggest tool you have as a human, and it's the only thing that'll separate you from AI in the future, but it's always been the thing that separates great leaders. That's why the coaches, Amos Alonzo Stagg was the winningest college coach until Paterno broke his record. And there's a story about Amos Alonzo Stagg at a faculty event. One of the professors said, you know, I'm not a football fan. I didn't go to the games this year, Amos. How'd we do? And he said, I don't know. Ask me in 10 years. Because it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about his impact on those young men. How'd they develop? Your legacy is how do those people develop? You heard David talking about, your ex-employees. Do you follow them? I told him the story after. Pat Riley, when they drafted Magic Johnson, they had a point guard for the Lakers at the time, Norm Nixon. They played together 1 year, and then they traded Nixon. When they traded him, they held a party, and they had a video celebration of all of his highlights and thanked him for everything he had done for the Lakers. Now, that's somebody they fired. Different industry, right? Because they traded him. But how do we celebrate? And the part David and I were talking about after was, it's your other employees when you celebrate someone leaving. Not who you fire, but someone who's leaving. If you celebrate their impact and input on your company, it's your other employees, their impression is the most important thing about that. It's like they actually care about people. Because we all talk about it. I mean, for 30 years, companies say, well, our greatest asset is our people. Really? Nobody acts like it. First of all, if you make people an asset instead of a human being, you've already lost because they're already a number. They're already just a thing. They're part of your assets, not part of your organism. So this is where you need to be developing people. When I said you're taking them to raise, we know more today about how the brain works and how to educate and how to move people beyond their human nature. And yet we spend no time trying to do that to make our companies and our organizations into an organism that's healthy and growing. Christian Brothers has seen this recently because I've been teased about it for the last 2 days. Okay? You didn't know you learned the secret to life in kindergarten. 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. Okay? Problem is, you need to forget about the 3, and that's not the way we're wired again, because you go to bed at night, you're responsible for that 3. You're in business for that 3, the results you get. You need to get more out of that equation, right? You're all worried. You want your company. When I ask you want your company to get better, why do you want your company to get better? Be honest. Yeah, you want to make more profit. We're all focused on the 3. You got to forget the 3. You can't change the 3. How many of you play golf? After you hit the ball, can you direct where it goes once it leaves the club head? No, you can beg and plead. That's what I do. I hit it and drop down on my knees, you know. You can beg and plead, but you can't affect it. Quarterback can't affect where the ball goes after a release. Pitcher can't. You can't affect the end result unless you affect the equation. And those 3 things, what are they practically? We're talking about why they work. Practically, what they are is your attitudes, your skills, and your actions. That's what produces results. So what are you doing to adjust attitudes, teach skills, and manage actions? And the only reason we manage actions is to come back and adjust attitudes, because it's attitudes that produce the actions. The behavior, when you're dealing with a problem, that problem resulted from bad behavior. But that bad behavior came from an attitude that was probably 3 months ago you missed it and you ignored it. And now that attitude has generated bad behavior. So you're just working that circle all the time because you can't change the 3 without changing the 1s. And the 1s won't change on their own by themselves. We already established it's just not what people do. So Shakespeare said it, didn't he? To be or not to be. He said it was a question. What he meant was it's the answer. Are you going to be? Because we're busy as humans doing. We do a lot of things. But who you are that you bring to what you do has the most effect on the result you get. That's back to that issue, a 20-year veteran. Experience is useless unless you're present and mindful and in the moment, bringing all of your energy to bring up all of that experience. Otherwise, you're just experienced, and usually you're experienced and grumpy. I mean, how many of you know an expert in our industry that's a pain in the butt? I just described your best installer, right? Well, you always were that way. I still remember a meeting when I was young, running my first flooring company with the owner and my best hard surface installer, a man named Bob Renwick. And Bob was going off. These idiots don't know what they're doing, and salespeople don't know what they're doing. Nobody knows what they're doing. And Morris looked at me and he said, he doesn't mean that. I said, no, the problem you have, Morris, is you think he doesn't, and he does. He believes that, and unless he changes his mind, I want him to install for another company and screw up their culture. And so I fired him, and he did that, and he stayed miserable for years and messed up every company he was in. But he was the best tactician I'd ever seen. So what? You don't win with the best talent, you win with the best group of talent. All right, so here's the thing too, and Jobs even said, and this is another quote that gets misused, doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire people, smart people, and ask them to tell us what to do. Well, that's great if you're hiring 160 IQ for technology and innovation. But what he did tell them, and Guy Kawasaki just said this, you either performed or you were fired. And that was a daily issue with jobs. You performed to your peak or you were gone. So he held them accountable to be more than they would be by themselves. This is how I am telling everybody to hire at this point. First question to ask somebody you're interviewing is, how much is your annual budget for self-improvement and development? Y'all know what you're going to get as an answer, don't you? Because if I ask you, what's your annual budget for self-improvement and development? What's your budget? Well, when I get time, because I'm too busy, but when I get time, I go on Amazon and look for the latest book. Okay, so my next question, and I just stop them. I don't need an answer. Next question is, what's the last book you read? And they'll, 90%, or they'll lie to you and you know it, and then you know you don't want them, okay? Then you stop them and you go, look, here's the issue. Are you ready to start learning, growing, and improving your attitude, skills, and actions to be an unselfish, trustworthy expert who is helpful, caring, and courageous? Are you willing to do that? If the answer is yes, hire them. But you also got to tell them at that moment, I'm going to hire you and you are welcome to be here until you stop doing that, and then I don't want you around. Now you've established that's the hiring mode. Make them sign it. I'm in California, so we have to be real specific, don't we? Okay? Make them sign it. This is your terms of employment. You're going to do these 12 things. This is the 12-step program to break your addiction to human nature. That's what that is. Because imagine what would happen if you did those 12 things for the next 5 years. And imagine if you got a group of people doing those 12 things for the next 5 years. How healthy would your organism be? And it isn't easy. But you hold each other accountable to it, and you start talking about it, and you start thinking about it. Because what it really is with leadership is you're managing their thought process and their dominant thoughts. What are your people thinking about? The day-to-day tasks and the frustration? Make them take 1 minute every hour. And pull that and just read that. 1 minute every hour. And you'll affect their behavior to produce better results. So coaching is a game changer. It is in business. When I first started, I was doing this stuff in retail. I was having great success. I was 19 years old, running 5 clothing stores, high-end, before I got into flooring. And my bosses came to me and said, what are you doing? I was 19. I didn't have a clue. You know, I show up late to the store. I party every night. You know, I don't know what I'm doing. Come watch. It took a while for me to put it into a thought process of what I was doing, but I was adjusting attitudes, teaching skills, and managing actions, and only managing actions so I could go back and find the attitude that screwed up the action and adjust it and just keep adjusting it. So who do you have that you've assigned to do that? Because the reason to do it is the fact that 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. If you're not doing that, I think Abby had mid-year last year had the best comment I've heard in a conversation with me. She goes, oh my God, we hired all these really good people and talented people, and they're smart people, and then you find out that they all have issues, and we're going to have to coach them forever. That's life. If you want to be excellent. If you want to be, how many of you just want to be mediocre? How many of you woke up this morning, got dressed, looked in the mirror and said, all I want to be is average? I haven't met a human in 40 years of 45 years of doing this, and in the last 27 speaking, I haven't met one human that answers that question, yeah, that's all I want to be is average. I haven't met one. Nobody wants to be. We're wired to be average, but we're created, our makeup is to be extraordinary. We want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. You need to give them that. Because it's hard to find right now. We're living in an age, it's hard to find some place to be part of something bigger than yourself. Your business can be that. So Jeff and I also talked, and I want to help. I want to help you do this. Except George knows I'm expensive, huh, George? It doesn't have to be, because we can get results and help you. So how about if you had an employee development program that was 1 hour of monthly sales session, 1 hour of monthly leadership, and 1 hour for your general employees online. The beginning of every month, you could send in emails of topics that are specific, but there is course material for the year for this. And how about if it only cost you $5.99 a month, and you're for all your employees, unlimited. You can put as many in these groups as you want. See, David's looking at me now. He's going, what do you mean? But it's not the same as live, is it, David? It is not the same as live, but it is better than doing nothing. And it gives you a platform for you to hold your people accountable to be learning and growing. Because you'll have the notes, you'll have the ability to look and see what's being taught if you don't have the time to join in. You can put your managers, you can put your salespeople, you can put your other employees. You can put the ones that you want to punish. Give them an hour with me. As Brian said last night, I can say things to them that you can't say. I can legally say things to them that you can't say. Avi's first quote on that when I said was, yeah, Mike can tell you you're addicted to being lazy, and he can make you feel good about it. That's Jeff early on said, I've never seen anybody that can just dress somebody down and say the hardest things to people and make them feel good about it. That's because I do it because I love people. I want to help them. And so I want to help you make a difference, so that's available. Also, Jeff mentioned the book. See the picture? Is that cool? If you like audiobooks, Janelle's been bugging me for a year. And we actually recorded it, and then my co-author is a home builder, and he did a big remodel on Richard Dreyfuss' house, and Dreyfuss read the book, and he said, this is incredible that two guys from construction wrote a book about trust, an industry nobody trusts, and you guys wrote about trust. And so he said, I'll read it. And we said, we can't afford to have you read it. It's a little cheapy book. And he said, no, I'll read it for free. So it's just finished up. It's in editing, so keep your eyes open if you like audiobooks. I liked it better than writing it or reading it myself, listening to Richard, because I grew up with his movies, and it was so cool to hear his voice. I thought, we didn't say that, did we, in the book? That's not what we said. It sounded better when he read it. And it really did. And in September, we're having our first Build Trust event in San Diego, big open event for people to come and just talk about how you build trust and why trust is so important and how to be trustworthy, which is that issue. It's not enough to be honest, is you're being trustworthy. All right, 5 minutes. Anybody got any questions? Anybody got any thoughts? Anybody want to argue? I like to argue. I do. I like to argue. I'm a firm believer you have the right to be wrong. This one right there, Mike. Oh. I'm teasing about you being wrong. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
When we are in a bad mood because we woke up to that awful email, I've noticed when we come in, we really telescope through the company. Mm-hmm. If we're in a bad mood, forget it. It says Paul.
Sure it does.
Completely through the ranks.
Mm-hmm.
How do we not do that?
The first issue, the reason I show that equation and we disappear the three, the result, if you don't believe that attitude, skills, and actions focused on people and those things will produce results, the things happening around you bump you around and change you emotionally. You know, it's the issue. I'm not a positive mental attitude guy. I'm a mental toughness guy. I don't believe I can stand in front of the mirror and go, I'm fit and healthy. I'm fit and healthy. My brain goes, no, you dumbass. You haven't worked out in 6 months and you're 10 pounds overweight, because it knows the truth. So the way you do that is all of what we just went through, you have to apply to yourself first. Are you committed to excellence first? Are you holding yourself accountable first? Your emotional intelligence is controllable. So when I feel that I'm frustrated, can I then act different? Because again, William James, 150, 170 years ago now, that issue of go for a fast walk. You go for a fast walk. You'll stay angry, but eventually that'll go away because you're not built for that. But don't go in and be the problem. Go in and be that solution to pick people up. Be a bucket filler, huh, Janelle? Janelle's son came home with a new one from school. He wants to be a bucket filler. I hadn't heard that. That's really good. I want to fill people's buckets up. John.
Mike, could you just go over again that $5.99 a month
Yes.
thing that you talked about?
Cost you $5.99 a month as a company, and you can put unlimited employees in those 3 one-hour meetings. Many of your people as you want. You get an hour of sales meeting, you get an hour leadership meeting, and you get a separate hour that's for general employee personal development. No, we'll all be together online. So it'll be a group, and there'll be some interaction, and I'll want emails from you on your topics. There's course material. It's a 12-hour course for each of them. It's a year's program. But I'll add things if you have specifics that you want addressed. We're struggling with this. Email them to me, and we'll add them in. It's for Fuse. It's not for anybody else. It's just for you guys, period. Okay? Yes, David.
I'm going to give you a plug here. I had Mike come in. I think, experiencing some of the same things, right? Like my attitude, I'm tired, I'm frustrated, right? All of it, and had sort of lost some of my own, motivation. And Mike coming in was great. We did a big thing for our employees, and they were all very appreciative of that. But what I really got through that experience is I was missing a coach. Many of the people that brought me up through the industry, mentors and bosses and people that I've relied on year after year after year, they're gone. And so I had really lost my coach, my source of inspiration. I really enjoy Mike. And so, he came in, we did this thing, but now I have not every day, but a connection to Mike where we check in with each other. And for me, it's a good source of staying positive, coach the coach, if you will. So I don't know if that helps, but the connection to Mike is helping me stay on that path of waking up in the morning to try and be a better coach, not a grumpy old curmudgeon manager guy. So
the interesting part with all of that, and George, I don't know if he remembers the first time we had dinner in Chicago, and I said, look, we can make this really short, and I can tell you what you want to hear and stroke your egos, or I can tell you the truth and piss you off. And at the moment I do that, you can either throw me out, or we get to start working and doing good work together, because for most of you, you're in power positions that people are afraid to tell you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And so we get comfortable. But again, I said, our human nature is such that we just want to get comfortable. You're all A-types, or you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. And as A-types, you're more driven, but you still got a plateau level. And you got an intolerance. Brittany, what Brittany always said, they just should do the work. They should do what I do. They should work as hard as I work, right? Okay. Does anybody know you should open your business on time? You need to provide good service. Those are practical things. If you use those 2 words about another person and the way they should behave or think, they should, they need, those are called cognitive distortions. Your brain is distorted because nobody should do or needs to do what you think. But part of our human nature is we think people should think like us. That's what we believe. It's built in us. Now, when we say it out loud, it sounds stupid, and we go, oh, no, I wouldn't do that. How many of you have ever used the phrase, they just don't get it? Yeah, see, if you've said that, you're exposing that you think they should think like you. Maybe you don't get it. I gave you another Dr. Phil moment. He's the best self-promoter, and I am not. Jeff knows it. Jeff actually pushes on me, too. What if I'm the guy that can push you and put another $10 million in your pocket? Because that's the end result. I want that to happen. I want that to happen for you. Because the only good way for that to happen is for you to change lives. If you change lives, which goes back to how you manage that. Why am I going into the office? I'm going in to help people learn, grow, and improve their attitude, skills, and actions to be unselfish, trustworthy experts who are helpful, caring, and courageous. Well, I can't help others do that if I'm not doing that. And if you don't renew your brain every day, not 1 minute an hour, take those 12 things, renew your brain. Dave's group's working on to-be lists now, individual to-be lists, which we do. How many of you remember when your teacher asked you that in school when you were little? It's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? You remember that? And what'd you say? What'd you tell him? Do you remember? Fireman. Hey, nobody said that. Nobody said a flooring contractor, because nobody chooses flooring. Kids get in it because they have to, because their parents are in it. And everybody else, we fall into it, okay? But teachers, we're trying to, this is a project with Richard Dreyfuss with the schools, trying to get teachers to realize, ask that question, but when kids tell you what they want to do, stop them and say, that's not what I asked. I didn't ask what you want to do. I asked who you want to be. Tell me 7 things you want people to know you are as a human being, because that's the tools you bring to what you do. Won't matter what you do if you are extraordinary. So the to-be list issue, telling people, and that's part of coaching. That's why those 12 steps work. You tell people to be that and hold them, but then you got to hold them accountable to do that. You got to hold them accountable. You don't give them an advance when they haven't earned it, because it's easier and because you want to be nice to them. You tell them, no, go to work. I don't give money to people begging on the side. I give big tips to the guy driving the Uber car. I give big tips to the guy who knocks on my door, asks if there's anything he can do around my house, even if there's nothing to do. But I'm not going to give it to the person that's not trying. And that's part of leadership, but that's part of love. And it's not tough love. That's the BS that we've wrapped around this in these last 30 years. Love's love. Love holds people accountable. So raise your love quotient, care enough about your people to really make a difference in their lives, and then your company will get better because your people do. Any other questions? Yeah, remember that. Well, you told me I had to let them go by 3:30. 2:30. Anyway, thank you. Be in touch if you're interested in talking. Okay? Thank you.
We love Mike, huh? That was excellent as always.
Thank you.
Excellent.